Sergeant Albert Paxton to come. Good afternoon, Mr. Paxton. Please state your name for the record.
It's Albert Paxton.
Mr. Paxton, you were the investigator in this incident initially. Is that correct, or soon after, I should say?
I was involved from the start, but I wasn't the initial investigator. A guy named Jerry Spencer was, but I was involved from the start.
Okay. But you were there shortly thereafter the incident itself?
Yes, sir.
Did you go there with Mr. Spencer, or did you go there on your own?
I drove. Well, actually, Jerry, I went to the hospital, Glenwood first, and that's where Mr. Greene's body was. Jerry went there. Jerry stayed there and photographed the body. I went up to the scene and met another detective there, a guy named Stephen Taylor. At the scene, I interviewed the deputy, Chris Harpin. I met him on scene, told him who I was, and said, "Hey, man, I'm investigating. Were you involved?" He said he helped put him in handcuffs, and I said, "Okay, I need to get a recorded statement from you. It doesn't have to be now; it can be later on, because you don't know what their involvement is." He said, "I didn't really do anything. I helped put him in handcuffs. I'll talk to you now." I got a recorded statement from him. Stephen Taylor stayed up there and took pictures. I went back to the troop, and that's where Gary Beasley, Patrick Morris, and Jerry Spencer were at the troop with John Clary, Hollingsworth, DeMoss, and Corey York. We're back at the troop.
And before we get to what happened from there, let me ask you this: how long have you been in? And I don't know what the right terms are.
Oh, I was with state police for like 13, because I retired. I was with state police for about 13 years and two months. I was in detectives for about 6 years. So, and in 2019, I'd been in about 3 years.
And you say detectives, is it just internal investigations or outside?
It's criminal. It's CID. It's Criminal Investigative Division. And I was in the Monroe Field office, which we're separate from Troop F. We have a separate facility and separate office, but we mirror the troops that they cover.
And prior to doing detective work, what kind of troop work did you do?
I was in narcotics for 2 years, so I was basically in the same office with the same lieutenant. And but then prior to that, I was with public affairs for 2 years up in the Troop F area. But I started my career. My first 4 years were Troop A. That's where I did patrol.
Okay.
But I'm originally from that area.
From Troop F area, or
I'm from Tallulah. It's in Madison Parish. So the Troop F area, yes, sir.
Okay. And so then, now let's back up and get into. So then you see the troopers from there. What happens?
We go to this after I talked to Chris Harpin. I go back to the troop and I see John Clary, and we're there. We're waiting on daylight. It's probably about 3 or 4 in the morning to search Ronald Greene's car, and we were going to get the videos, whatever videos we had from the scene. We didn't have access to the Axon. I wasn't familiar with it. I was from a stance that we'll do use of force complaints, officer involved shooting, and in custody death investigations for other departments, not just LSP. So we had been familiar with body cameras, but it's basically like when we're going to Troop F, it's like we're going to another department. We're like, hey, we need all your videos related to the event. I saw John Clary. I told him, what I needed, and I asked him if he had body camera. He said he didn't have any, and I said, were you involved at all? I said, yeah, I got there. He was still alive, but it was over with. He was in custody when I got there, and I told him the same thing. I said, Harp, I need to get a statement from you, Lieutenant, but it doesn't have to be now. It can be later on in the week when the other two guys, DeMoss and Hollingsworth, come in. No, I didn't do anything. It was over when I got there. I'll give you a statement now. And that's the recorded statement that you're talking about.
So to be clear, though, the recorded statement doesn't have any mention of a body cam.
No, I mean, I didn't ask him about it. I just said, hey, just tell me what happened. And he told me what happened. And he said, first he described the pursuit, which he wasn't involved in, but he described that. I was like, okay. Then he said he got there, and I mean, it's recorded and it's transcribed in the supplement. He describes what he saw when he got there, and he said Ronald Greene was still resisting and trying to get away and being uncooperative. Well, you can watch his body camera footage and tell that's not what Ronald Greene is doing.
Okay, and then but you are aware that other people had body cameras at this.
They had the body cameras, and he said he was downloading those videos for us, and he downloaded.
Who's he? I mean,
John Clary.
Okay.
John Clary. Because he knew we didn't have access to it. I mean, that wasn't a secret. I mean, they had the patrol guys that had it for a while, but we don't have it. And when I left, the detectives were just starting to get them. I mean, I don't think they're going to need them for their typical day-to-day stuff, because it's different when you're in uniform, but we didn't have them then. He was downloading them. He downloaded at Hollingsworth's and DeMoss's. And he put them on a thumb drive, and he gave us Hollingsworth and DeMoss's body camera videos. It was 2 for Hollingsworth and 1 for DeMoss. And then he gave us his dash camera video. Clary had dash camera, but he said he didn't have body camera.
Clary's the one who physically gave this to you on a thumb drive?
He put it on a thumb drive and gave it to us.
Did he tell you what was in the contents of that thumb drive when he gave it to you?
He just said, here the videos you're asking for.
Okay. Was it your impression that those are all the videos that recorded at the scene was on that thumb drive?
It was. Well, we knew that, and I'd asked Corey York. I told him the same thing. I needed to get a statement from him. It depended on, it didn't have to be right then, because usually if somebody's involved in a traumatic event, a police officer, you want to give them a couple days, a couple sleep cycles. They don't have to wait, but it's up to them. He said everything was over with before he got there. He was already in custody, and he was going to give me a statement that morning. And he said that he had turned his stuff off because Ronald Greene was already in custody before he got there, so there was no reason to keep it on.
Okay. And then what happens next in the investigation?
We get the thumb drives of the video. We get a search warrant for Ronald Greene's car, and we search it. And Jerry was the initial case agent. He ended up going back. We searched it one time in the morning, and then he went back later in the morning to get it. And then at that point, we started watching Hollingsworth's video, not Hollingsworth. We watched Hollingsworth and DeMoss's, but Clary and York both said everything was over before they got there when Ronald Greene was in custody. So we just kind of watched up until Ronald Greene had his handcuffs on. And at that point, you can kind of take a deep breath, because as officer-involved shooting or in custody death, most of the answers are going to come to you. It's not like you have a homicide where you got to do 30 interviews to figure out who was there, get a timeline. You can kind of take a deep breath. You know all the people involved. You know where they work. You know who they are. And there was like Facebook stuff about somebody saying that they had security video of the incident. So we started kind of trying to run that down. And then at some point, Jerry contacted somebody who had made the death notification, and they had a phone number from Ms. Harden. And we called Ms. Harden mid-afternoon or something like that, identified who we were, and said that we were investigating. And she told us that somebody told her that he died in a crash. And we said, no, ma'am, he didn't die. There was a crash, but there was a struggle. And he did die, but we don't know exactly. There's an autopsy that's going to be done. And at that point, I didn't have any more contact with her until July, when Jerry had quit state police and gone to work for the Richland Parish Sheriff's Office. But that's pretty much all we did that first Friday. Jerry was the initial case agent. I was helping him collect the evidence. I wasn't as worried about getting involved and like going through the videos as much at that point. I had a couple other cases going on, so it was just, I was kind of worried about my stuff more than anything else. Scott Brown and Caleb Reeves were also in the detective unit, but they weren't involved in that investigation because it was they both live in Jackson Parish, and there was a lot of some pretty serious tornadoes that came through. So both of them were dealing with damage and they just had taken off. Scott came in that Monday, and Jerry Spencer and Gary Beasley, who was a lieutenant, involved in and kind of briefed him on what we had. And that's one of the things that we went over, all the evidence we have. I think one of the things that's been reported is that I wasn't the first person who told Scott that the only body camera footage we had of that was Dakota DeMoss's. There were multiple people there. We were under the impression nobody else had body camera of it. Because John Clary told me that morning, I was the only one that he told when I asked him. There wasn't anybody else around. He said he didn't have body camera of it.
Now, I have heard from others who've insinuated or said that you always knew about the Clary body cam video and that you got it on the initial thumb drive. And that's not correct, is what you're telling me?
Yeah, no, he did not give it to us on the initial thumb drive. And when Colonel Davis talked about the investigation that they did, can I bring out a text message that WBRZ had from Colonel Davis to the governor?
You can do whatever I'm not limiting you in any.
This is from a WBRZ report. This is Lamar Davis to the governor. And I'm skipping through some stuff, but he says, during the administrative review of the Greene incident, participating personnel discovered 3 videos previously submitted from Clary's body-worn camera that are not part of the original evidence submitted to Mr. Belton. And he says that they were used in his disciplinary review of York, and I'm skipping ahead to stuff. And he said, additionally, I opened an internal investigation into this matter. The investigation revealed that Clary logged and submitted the videos in evidence.com in accordance with LSP policy. I'm not disputing that at all. As a result of investigation discovered, as a result of information discovered, IA investigators learned that 3 current and 2 former LSP employees were involved in conducting the initial investigation. The only 3 current LSP employees when they investigated this were me, John Clary, and Corey York. There were 4 other detectives involved: Stephen Taylor, Patrick Morris, Gary Beasley, and Jerry Spencer. And he said, we attempted to interview both the former employees, both declined to be interviewed. Well, if I made criminal complaints, they just investigated this as an administrative. I don't know why the guys refused to. I mean, they could have gone up there to talk to them. And I don't know who, this is what I'm reading from a text that Colonel Davis sent to the governor. When I made these complaints, nobody ever told me what the results were or what happened or what they determined. And anytime I would ask about it, it's an internal investigation. Nothing was, I can't remember what's the word they always use, sustained. So it's not public record.
Did they agree to give you a report after the fact, like they did this committee?
Anytime I raised any kind of concern about it, it was like they got mad about it. I came back from Jason Turner. You need to shut up. Don't talk about it anymore.
So how did you first become aware of the Clary video?
Talking to Scott Davis, when all this stuff started happening, all the hurricanes and things in 2020, LSPs, it was right around this time that there was a recording of Chris Hollingsworth talking on the phone about what they did. That got out. There were all these hurricanes going on, so people in LSP started kind of talking about it. I got through the grapevine. I heard that Scott Davis had problems with it. So I knew him, but I didn't really know him that well. It's been 1,000 people in 2 different areas. So I reached out to him, and I asked him about it. And we just focused. We talked about Hollingsworth and Hollingsworth's video and all the things that Hollingsworth did. Because the biggest concern for me, especially with what we had, was as soon as Hollingsworth he filmed himself doing this with his dash camera or his body camera on his dash camera. As soon as he heard there was a police action, he reaches up and takes down his dash camera and turns on his emergency lights. Then he turns off his body camera 4 minutes into it. Then he tases Ronald Greene when his hands are up and he's trying to give up. When Ronald Greene is obeying DeMoss's commands to show his hands. So that's really, to me, that was, that's what we focused on. We didn't get into a lot of details of it, but I heard he had issues with it. And he also told me that he had issues.
You keep saying he, but
Scott Davis. Okay.
Please, because it's
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
And so, and I told him about us wanting to arrest Chris Hollingsworth, and I told him about how we were told that, or how we were threatened, Scott Brown and I, about if John Peters said that if this investigation led to any arrest, there'd be trouble with BOI and patrol. And he also said what we would do is we don't turn the videos over and we don't tell the DA about them.
Now, who said we don't turn the videos?
John Peters said that to me and Scott Brown.
And when we're saying videos, which videos are we talking
by
about?
Anybody case? He made it like what they do that's something that they do sometimes with other personnel, with Troop F personnel.
Is he all the videos or just the Clary videos?
No. I'm talking about other instances that are not involved in it. And that's what I was telling Scott Davis about, and that's when he brought up all these other things with the Bowman investigation, and there's another one too that they didn't turn over videos. Antonio Harris. So we talked some that day or whatever, and then we kind of stayed in touch just briefly. They started to do the other investigations, and Scott and I were talking about some more stuff about when they're trying to come up with a new FIU unit and they're wanting our input, and both of us were against it because it was in my opinion, it's a waste of resources.
And again, just like I told everybody, FIU, what does FIU stand for?
Force Investigation Unit.
Okay.
Anyway, we were talking more about the Ronald Greene, going back and talking about the Ronald Greene video or incident, and he mentioned a phone call that Clary had with Peters, and I was like at the scene, and I thought he was. I mean, I was like, well, what? How did you hear that? And he said Clary's body camera, and I told him Clary didn't have body camera. He said, yeah, he did, and so that's when I first became aware of it in April.
And what is the significance of the Clary video itself?
Well, Clary's video adds sound when DeMoss turns his sound off at one point. And Clary's video, to me, is more important for what happened to Ronald Greene after he was handcuffed. You can break that incident down into two parts. From the time that he crashes his car and he sticks his hands up till they get him out of the car and then he's handcuffed. Once he's handcuffed, and then you can hear him. One of the things that Clary told me too, that he was being belligerent and trying to get away, and I have to look exactly, but he was just saying he was still resisting. Well, the sound, all you can hear is Ronald Greene saying that he's sorry and he's apologizing, and you can tell. And if there's one point when Corey York drags him back and pins his legs, and then DeMoss gets in his car. And you cannot see anything but the inside of DeMoss's car. Well, with Clary's video, you can see them move in around him and do something to him. You hear him scream out. They also gloved up prior to this. They'd already, when I say they, I mean DeMoss, or not DeMoss, but York, Hollingsworth, and Harpin. Or they had washed blood off. Then York pulls him back, pins his feet. They move in around his head, and they do something to him. You hear him scream out. Harpin laughs and giggles. That shit hurts, doesn't it? Well, you don't hear any of this from DeMoss's video, but now you can hear it, and you can't see exactly what they're doing, but there's no question that they're doing something to him. I think, based on the evidence, that they're putting OC spray in his face. Now, you can disagree with that. That's fine, but I don't think there's any question that they're doing something to him. And to this day, I didn't discover this until April of 2021. To this day, as far as I know, nobody's ever asked York or Clary or Harpin, what did y'all do to him? And when I made these complaints, when Scott Brown and I made these complaints, we made criminal complaints, not administrative complaints.
So, as this process goes on, did you give the evidence to District Attorney Belton?
I put it on a thumb drive and wrote a supplement and submitted to and called Mr. Belton first and said, "Look, this is, to me, in my opinion, this is important. You need to see it."
Prior to that, though, were you the person who gave Belton the original evidence
of the case file? Yes, sir.
Okay, and that did not include the Clary video.
It did not have the Clary video on it.
And at that time, were you having conversations with Belton about investigating this matter, prosecuting this matter, I should say? About
the Clary, or just the whole thing in general?
The whole thing in general.
I mean, I told him what my opinions were on it, but he just said the initial meeting that we had, it was me, Scott Brown, Lori James, John Belton, and this was in August or September of 19, when Mr. Belton saw just the DeMoss video and said, "It's the worst thing I've ever seen," that he was going to call the U.S. attorney or call the feds. And at that point, I really didn't. The only other time he came, I saw him in October of 19, and he told me that's when the first time I heard the awful but lawful. He said, "Your colonel called it awful but lawful."
And when he said your colonel, he's referring
He's talking about Reeves. And I said, "Well, I disagree with that, sir, but I can't say that out loud. I got to be kind of careful about what I say." And that was when the governor was at some event at Louisiana Tech. I was up there helping protective services.
So let's back up. You are in Louisiana Tech at an event?
At some event that the governor came up for in 2019, October of 19.
And at that...
Date on some of these things?
Yeah. Yeah. It's October. And that's why I made this log. Scott Brown and I had the conversation that what rolls downhill. And as soon as this stuff doesn't happen, they want somebody to blame, and they're going to blame us. Okay. So I wanted to make a log of everything that I did.
Yep.
Members, yes, sir.
And I want to clarify with y'all, there are typed notes that Mr. Paxton has provided us. They were provided to the Senate. Hold on a second. The Senate committee. So if you look in the stuff that we gave you from the Senate committee, you can find the actual timeline, which has the actual dates that he's referencing. So you're at this event. You're approached by
I'm standing over in a corner. I mean, just kind of away from everybody by myself. I'm the only one around there. Mr. Belton sees me, comes over, says hello. Just like, how you doing, all that kind of stuff. He goes, man, your colonel said that stuff is awful but lawful. And I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And I said that, I don't agree with that, sir. And at that point, it's my understanding he'd already contacted the feds about it. And I said, I don't agree with the awful but lawful part of it. But I mean, that's just I can't say that. I mean, I can tell you, and I told him that. I'm talking about Mr. Belton, but I mean, I'm just a trooper at that point.
Right.
So.
And are you part of the governor's detail for this?
No, I'm not part of I'm part of the governor's detail for that thing. When protective services comes up, we have to if we know the area better and we can help them make sure they get where they're going.
Okay. So you're not with the governor?
No, sir. I mean, the governor wasn't anywhere around when that conversation was going on. So a lot of times we're not even. I may be going to an advance thing or something. I don't even remember seeing the governor at that spot or whatever when that happened.
Was District Attorney Belton there to meet with the governor that day, or not? Maybe specifically formal meet, but was he there to be part of the informal event?
Probably, yes, sir.
So then you have that going on. I guess, were you in the meeting, and you were in the audience, so I'm assuming you know what I'm referencing, where it's described that Lieutenant Cain became angry at the.
I wasn't there. Lori James and Mr. Belton told me about it. They called and they said, "Did y'all know that they were coming up here to do this?" And we said, no, nobody's ever talked to us about it. Nobody told us that. We didn't know. It was Lori James who told me that Doug got mad about it.
And what was your impression of that meeting from what the DA's office was telling
you?
They
didn't want John Belton to do anything to John Clary.
Did she give you a reason why?
She didn't say. They just didn't agree with what. I think they said that there was a point where he screams out when they're doing something to him. They said they're pulling taser probes from him. Well, you can look at the evidence. Ronald Greene was tased twice, by Chris Hollingsworth once and then by Dakota DeMoss once. All of that means there's 4 taser probes because each tasing has 2 probes. All of the taser probes can be seen in his body or his clothes, either in video after that event or in pictures from when Jerry picked up his clothes at the hospital. So that was, unless Doug Cain knew about another time he was tased when he was off body camera that we didn't know about, then that was impossible.
And I want to take this moment to tell you something of the criticism I've heard of your investigation. Because I want to give you an opportunity to respond to it. Is that you were not an experienced death investigator, and so you should not have been initially assigned this task.
Yeah.
Do you think you were not up to the task of investigating this because of your lack of experience in death investigations?
Well, I'm not perfect, but No, that's ridiculous.
Have you investigated death before?
Multiple deaths. I was actually working a homicide while this was going on in Union Parish. And that was, I don't know, I mean, I've been in detectives 3 years, and Monroe, we work in a rural area. I mean, I'll let Scott Brown talk to that. You can go back and look at the cases I worked prior to that.
Sure, and look, I want to give you the opportunity, like I'm giving.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that.
The other thing I've heard, and I want to give you the opportunity to answer too, is that you and Scott Brown are too close to one another, and that y'all are really just backing each other up on this kind of scenario.
Yeah. When you're trying to tell the truth, we were close before, but when you're trying to tell the truth and you're being attacked, it does make you close. I don't really know how Clary's recorded statement or the videos that show that. If you don't, it's not really a question of, if you don't believe me, that's fine. I don't know how else to explain the videos or the recorded statements I got. I mean, don't believe me. It's never been my word. It's been the evidence. And it's not been my word from the start. It's been Gary Beasley's and Jerry Spencer's. I don't know. As far as I know, LSP has never talked to them.
And Jerry Spencer was on the
He
scene.
was the initial case agent.
And to your knowledge, he's never given a supplemental kind of
As far as I know, he's never talked to LSP. And then I'm looking at the text message Lamar Davis sent to the governor. There were 2 other investigators involved that refused to provide statements. And he said they talked to 3 people, involved. The only that were still with LSP, the only 3 people, and this is a fact, the only 3 people that were at the troop that morning that were still with LSP were me, Corey York, and John Clary.
And I really want to give you the opportunity because, I mean, I think that, let's just address the elephant in the room. I think there's people who are suggesting that you are coming forward now because you're bitter, you know, as far as your career in state police. Is that an accurate statement?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was coming forward before. I mean, I don't know what you're talking about now that I'm sitting here now. I'm trying to think how. Okay, I raised all these concerns about the Ronald Greene incident. I've stated all these things. I decides to go through all my emails, and they find emails I send to my wife. I've gotten her to approve reports for 14 years. She's an attorney and an accountant. She's the most valuable resource I've ever had. Scott Brown has encouraged me to use her as somebody to approve reports. When I get called out at 1:30 in the morning to go to a homicide, I have 3 small children. She suffers more than I do. They wanted to know why I emailed her reports to prove. I told them. They said they wanted to question her and me. We went down there. They harassed her and wanted to play word games with her. Then they wanted to play word games with me. These are the IA investigators, Richard Buckland and Kevin Ducote. You can get them in here and ask them. You can show the videos of our IA of the interviews. After my wife was treated like that by the department, I was not going to spend any more. I was not going to make her suffer through any more weekends where I was gone for 2 or 3 days dealing with a homicide or another case. So I'm very upset about the way my wife was treated. There's no doubt about that. Now, all these people that are telling you, I'll give you my phone number. Give it to them. Tell them to call me. Nobody said that to my face. So and I'm retired now. The videos and Clary's statements are still there. All those people that are telling you that, you tell them to take the case over then. You tell them to sit there and look at the videos and explain to you how they think they're okay.
Sure, I understand completely. So did anybody tell you at state police to quit investigating this criminal activity as you classified it?
We had a meeting in May 16th, 2019. It was May 16th or 17th. It was the Friday afterwards. Me, Scott Brown, Gary Beasley, Jerry Spencer, Caleb Reeves, John Peters, Bob Brown. We went over what we had at that point, and we didn't even have the autopsy back, so we didn't know exactly how he died. We said Chris Hollingsworth took down his dash camera and turned off his body camera, and then committed an aggravated battery by shooting him in the face. And then Ronald Greene died. At the very least, we need to start thinking about doing something with Chris Hollingsworth. Arrest him for turning off his cameras, not just because he turned off his cameras, but what he did after he turned off his cameras. We were told by John Peters that if any arrest came from this investigation, that there'd be issues with patrol and BOI. Bob Brown sat there and watched it.
What's BOI? I apologize.
Bureau of Investigation.
Okay.
Bob Brown watched it. That meant they were okay with everything that happened. Okay, fine. I called Jason Turner the next week, told him about it, there was no support for what we wanted to do. So did somebody say quit investigating it? Not initially in that part of it, but it was. They didn't do anything wrong, and we're okay with everything.
Were you told not to provide the Clary video to
Bo Loomis told Scott Brown just to send John, and he'd have to tell you more about that, just to send John Belton a letter saying we discovered it. And I was going to write a supplement. Bo said, we're going to let the FBI handle it, so you don't need to write a supplement. Scott can testify to this. Scott said, no, we're going to write a supplement. If you don't want me to do it or do any of this stuff, then you need to put it in an email, put it in writing. And they didn't do it.
And from there, at what point did you get pulled off the investigation?
Well, I I wrote the supplement. We made the criminal complaints. We said, look, this is what happened. We think this needs to be investigated criminally for John Clary. We showed the video and all the stuff to Kenny Van Buren, Bo Loomis, who's the captain, and Chavez Cameron back in April at some point. And they said, okay, we thought that they were going to open up a criminal investigation into it. Then that's when, and Scott Brown told them, Albert's going to write a supplement and we'll give it to the DA. And they were like, okay. That's when Bo Loomis contacted Scott later and said, we just need to send Belton a letter letting him know about the other video. And but at that point, I'd already told Lori, and she wanted us to bring it for him to see it. And that's when Bo told Scott, well, me and Jason, talking about Jason Turner, we're talking, Albert really doesn't need to write a supplement. Scott said, that's fine, but put it in writing. They wouldn't put it in writing.
Were you asked to sign NDA by any chance?
No, sir.
Agreement? Okay. I'm going to turn the questions over to some other members. I'm sure they have questions. Representative Marcel.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Paxton, how long were you with state police?
13 years and 10 months.
Okay, and you currently are retired?
I retired to take a job in banking.
And was that due to some of the pressure? And I think you
Well, I mean, the Ronald Greene, I was fortunate that I was able to find a good job. I started looking. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the Ronald Greene incident didn't have anything to do with it. But it's like I said before, my wife suffers more and my children suffer more than I do when I get called out. After the way she was treated by the department, there were people that I cannot work with anymore. Not everybody. I'm happy to say this, not just for y'all and to the public, but y'all said this too, how LSP people have contacted y'all. Most of them don't know this. Doug Cain said today under oath that public internal affairs investigations are public. I was always told if they were unfounded, then they wouldn't be public.
Okay.
So I mean that you can figure that out, and the reason that they don't want to talk about it typically is because they don't. You're supposed to protect the privacy of the person that's been accused. Well, I want the whole thing aired out.
Okay, so let's go back to the initial part of your investigation, the day that Ronald Greene died.
Yes, ma'am.
You were on the scene. You were one of the first people. That
I was on the yes, ma'am. I was one of the first one up at the scene. Now the incident happened around midnight, 1 in the morning. But by the time I got out there, it was probably 2:33 in the morning. So like the tow truck driver was out there picking up Ronald Greene's car and stuff like that.
So just a couple of things, because I know that the prosecutor on the other end is going to ask all the other questions. One, once you got to the hospital and you saw Ronald Greene's body,
I didn't see his body at the hospital.
Body?
I didn't see it.
Where did you see it?
I didn't see. I've actually never physically seen Ron. I've just seen pictures. Jerry was at the hospital.
Okay, so Jerry went to the hospital.
Yes, ma'am. He was going to take pictures of the body. Once that was, I said, hey, man, I'm going to go up to the scene. I'm going to meet Stephen Taylor up there and get him to take pictures of the scene. Make sure there's nobody else for us to talk to.
So when you went back to the scene, you started to ask for the information that you would typically ask for, like the body cameras and all of that information?
I didn't ask for that until I went to the scene just to look around. Because the scene, Union Parish, where it happened, is probably 30 miles from the troop. They were going to tow the car back to the troop, and I knew enough that I wouldn't be able to get the body camera stuff and there at the scene and be back at the troop.
Right.
So I went there to make sure there wasn't anything else to be done. That's when I saw Harpin, and I introduced myself. Hey, man, were you involved? Yeah, I came afterwards. I helped put him in handcuffs, and I said, okay, well, man, I need to get a statement.
What's Harpin's first name?
Chris Harpin. He's a deputy with Union Parish.
Okay, so question. Are you telling us today that Clary told you that he didn't have a body camera?
Yes,
video,
ma'am. He told me
right?
that back at the troop.
At the troop, right. So the people that told you that there was no body camera, right? Clary and, was it DeMoss?
Well, no. Clary told me, Clary said he didn't have body camera.
He didn't have body camera.
Yeah, but the other people did. DeMoss and Hollingsworth did.
They did. But he didn't have one.
He said he didn't have one.
So he would have known that night that he had body camera, though.
Oh, yes,
correct?
Ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So that means that he lied on the onset of this investigation.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So the people that have come to this table and have stood by the fact that Clary have not been terminated, would you say that they are covering up something?
Yes, ma'am. I think they are.
Okay. So, in your opinion, and you were a detective, the things that you saw that happened in Ronald Greene's death, the night of, the things that were omitted, the videos that were left out, is actually looks like a wide cover up. I mean, like this person may be covering for that person, or not presenting information is also a part of a cover up. Would you believe?
I believe that Clary lied to me about who all knows for sure that he lied. I don't know how you can watch his video and listen to his recorded statement and not come away and say he's not telling the truth. Now, if that's your opinion, that's your opinion. But no, I think Clary covered it up to hide the video from me. Why nothing else has happened to him, they say that's their opinion.
Right.
Well, I mean, that's their opinion. But I don't know how you can listen to his recorded statement that morning,
Right.
watch his video, and not see
And
that
draw
he
the
lied.
conclusion that
He's not telling the truth.
not telling the truth. And you said Scott Davis had issues.
He said he had issues with some people at Troop F, and that's the people that they investigated. Jake Brown, Colby Dickerson, Dakota DeMoss and then Cam Harper. I don't remember all the other people. I wasn't really involved in those investigations. When Gus Bethea came up, I was his point of contact, and I just introduced him to some people in the first investigation, the Bowman one. I really wasn't involved. I kind of let him use our office. But then he asked me to go to Richland Parish to pick up the arrest reports that those guys made for Antonio Harris. I
don't want to cut you off, but I'm running short on my time. So John Peters, right?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
John Peters said, and I think you made it clear that he said if anybody gets.
He said if anybody gets arrested as a result of this investigation, there's going to be issues with patrol and BOI.
And that statement was made to you.
To me, yes, ma'am.
Did you take that as a threat?
Well, yeah, yes, ma'am, I did.
I would.
Yeah.
I would. So, John Peters is where in the rank?
He was the captain of the Troop F at the time. He
was
retired.
captain of Troop F.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
all of these officers that some of these officers that gave misleading information and lied were under his leadership.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you say that?
Yes, ma'am.
And so that's what he said. And then Chavez Cameron. Tell me what is his relationship, and then I'll be finished.
Well, he's over. I don't know what his role is. Role was in 2019 at that time, but he's the over patrol now. He's a lieutenant colonel over patrol now.
Okay.
But I don't know what his. I think he was a captain in public affairs or somewhere at the time, or internal affairs. I don't know.
Okay.
At that 2019, May of 2019.
And just one final question. You've been there 13 years. You've been a detective. Do you find it odd that 3 of the people with Cain and Noel and whoever sanitize their phones would sanitize their phone in the middle of this investigation? Do you find that odd at all?
I mean, I really can't speak to that. I want to stay in what I know and not I don't want to speculate in what I've observed. I can just tell you this, that if you have...
Let me ask you a question. Had you ever experienced where people in high rank would turn in their phones like that, that you knew of, while an investigation was going on?
That would probably be suspicious, and you wouldn't want to do it. And you want to make sure that you had a backup or you kept a log of it. So, I mean, I can understand how with all this going on, that would seem suspicious.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Yes,
and thank you for launching the criminal investigation and giving us a little clarity on some truths about what happened with regards to Ronald Greene's death. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Jordan for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Paxton, let me just first thank you for your service and the years that you provided the state police.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And it's unfortunate that I understand why you left the profession, but it's unfortunate, in my opinion, that you had to leave the profession. That being said, let me ask you a couple of questions. I asked Doug Cain earlier today, did he ever coach or advise Clary before his IA hearing? Do you have any knowledge of any of that?
I third hand that Kevin Reeves talked to Doug, and and Kevin Reeves talked to John Clary about the IA investigations. That's what Clary was telling people at the troop. Now, they didn't tell me, but I mean, I documented everything that I heard like that.
All right, and so there was at least some rumor that they had,
yes, sir,
coached him as part of his prior to his IA hearing, or DRC, or whatever they call it.
Yes, sir.
All right. And then they also said that you were interviewed for his hearing. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir. They
All right.
They interviewed me for the investigation.
All right.
And I told them the same thing that I said here, and I brought up the recorded statement and the videos about what went on, and I mean that, you know, they apparently they didn't see they didn't think that the video or the audio was just like you've made the point. That to me that's evidence. That's physical evidence. I guess that you have to ask them. I don't know why.
No, that's fine. I'm just trying. I'll be honest with you. It's difficult for me to reconcile that they got your statement, that you said the same things that you're saying here to us today, and that it was not sustained. I'll be honest with you. I just have a hard time.
Well, and they didn't, like, according to the text that Lamar Davis sent the governor, the only three people that they interviewed were me, York, and Clary. I mean, they could have interviewed Scott Brown and asked him what happened. He wasn't there that morning, but he wasn't. But he was there the following week, and they didn't interview Scott Brown. He still worked for the department.
All right. Let me ask you: was during your entire investigation, and I'm not sure if because I did see most of your testimony in the Senate hearing. Was your access to evidence.com ever restricted in any way?
I mean, it was always restricted, and I didn't have an account on it till after May of 2019. But even after that, if somebody from the troop got involved in something, I would still have to get permission from their supervisors to view their video. I couldn't query it like Kevin Reeves said last week and just go in there and look at all the other people could, but I never could.
Why is that?
They never gave me permission to.
Okay, but somebody in your role, should you have had, and I'm gonna just use the word unfettered access or free access to review those videos as part of your investigation or part of your job duties?
I mean, I think it would help. I mean, they should have it.
All right, but they didn't.
No, sir.
All right. I guess I'm trying to figure out. You've sort of said to Representative Marcel you believe that there was a cover-up, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, just succinctly, if you can, just give the reasons why you feel. If we had to say, I think it was a cover-up, look at A, look at B, look at C, look at D, just so that we could understand and the public itself can have a better understanding.
If you look at what Clary told me that morning, watch his video, talk to everybody else that was actually involved in the investigation, whether they're with the department or not, and then see that the current administration didn't want to do anything to Clary. I mean, I think that's very suspicious. Okay.
And you're saying, when you say everybody else, you're talking about Bob Brown, higher ups, people much higher than you within state police, that basically.
Well, Bob Brown was gone by the time I discovered the Clary video.
Okay.
That was Doug Cain. Lori James told me that Doug Cain was angry when they talked about prosecuting John Clary. Now, he can say that he wasn't. And I can't remember exactly what he said, but it's my impression they went up there to stop anything from happening.
You say they?
Chavez Cameron, Lamar Davis, Faye Morrison, and Doug Cain.
Okay. So the four of them went to meet with Belton?
Yes, sir.
DA Belton?
Yes, sir.
And it was your impression that they went to prevent any trooper from being prosecuted.
Yes, sir.
All right. And let me ask it this way: to your knowledge, has any on the state level has any trooper been prosecuted?
And nobody has.
Okay. Do you believe somebody should be prosecuted
Yes, sir.
besides Hollingsworth?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Who do you believe should be prosecuted?
Well, I believe that Corey York and John Clary should be.
All right. Did anybody give you? I mean, we've been talking a lot about Clary, but did anybody give you any more information on York? I mean, other than I know you've heard the colonel agree that he believes the punishment for York was lenient, but
Well, and he used John Clary's video to punish him. And if you have a supervisor that you're using his video to punish the person doing something, and the supervisor's watching it, you don't think the supervisor's responsible? At one point, they're holding Ronald Greene on the ground, and John Clary walks up to York, and he looks up at him and says, I was going to set him up, but I don't want him spitting blood on us. And John Clary says, yeah, don't do that. Well, he's looking at his lieutenant and telling him what he's doing and why he's doing it. And he said, yeah, don't do that. I
understand. Let me ask you this: though. Are you look? I know we're gonna have Scott Davis as well, but I guess would you defer to him as far as being a use of force expert?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'll save most of my questions for him. Then I have no further questions.
Thank you, Representative. And I wanted to ask you, May 24, 2021, you did get called by Doug Cain. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And did he refer to Clary's actions as the Clary mistake in your
Well,
recollection?
that's how it was. I don't know if he referred to it as a mistake, but it was Turner said that Jason Turner said at some point, and that during that time we need to figure out so the Clary do some stuff with policy so the Clary mistake doesn't happen again. And I don't know exactly what the mistake was in his opinion. They didn't clarify it, but it was. It wasn't a mistake. Look, if you want to say somebody made a mistake, you're right. I made a huge mistake. I trusted John Clary on that morning. But as far as him hiding video, it wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. He lied about it.
Sure. And when Doug Cain calls you, did he tell you that he believed that Clary was not involved in any kind of cover-up?
He said he's known Clary for a while through work, and he would be really surprised to see that be very surprised that he was involved in a cover-up or hiding video. And I mean, I just said, okay. I mean, I didn't know what else to say except for what about what was on the video and what he told me.
I've said this before, and I always go back to it. My great-grandmother has a saying that has been passed down to all the parents, and we tell all our kids this. And when we say, do you not trust me, we always say, to trust is good, to not trust is better. And that's sort of been a mantra in our family forever. And I think what I'm hearing is concerning me is that there seems to be a little bit of a trust relationship with Clary, that he was acting correctly instead of an actual verification of that. Is that fair to say?
That they're trusting that he was acting?
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know. It's not even really a question of whether you trust. It's what the video shows, what he was supervising, and what he told me that morning.
Have you had any conversations with Clary since then?
No, sir.
Did you have any other communications with Doug Cain other than that? Well, I think you had one other time, too.
I called him in December of 2020 because and I may bring this stuff up, and some of this stuff has already been reported to WBRZ, or they've already leaked it. There was a email chain that from between John Peters and Faye Morrison on November 4th of 2020, and it was John Peters, and he CC'd Scott Brown and I on it. And he said, "Good afternoon, Faye. Prior to our previous meetings on the Greene incident, we had one of our reconstructionists crunch some of the data obtained from the crash data recorder in Greene's vehicle. He then reached out to a counterpart who instructs for Northwestern. Rough estimates indicate the impact, sudden speed reduction, and violent rotation of Greene's vehicle generated approximately 19 G's of force. Attached are some of the studies he referred, citing the aortic Aortic ruptures and vehicle crashes. The detective, this is what really concerned me. The detectives proved we did not cause his death. But the ME, the medical examiner, more or less glances over this fact, focusing on the excited, agitated delirium. I'm not sure where to steer this, and this wording is important when he says, I'm not sure where to steer this. But there is a significant amount of unused information that's in the unused information include the X and Y axis of changes in vehicle that could have significant value on the civil side as we try to reduce our percentage of liability. Well, we had a brand new colonel, and everybody was brand new. And the reason that he said, that John Peters said, I'm not sure where to steer this, because either on the same day or before that, a lieutenant from the troop, Bobby Bickerhoff, called Scott Brown and told him they had done this and they wanted this part of the case file. Or he said, hey, y'all may want to put it in there. And Scott basically blew him off. So he sends this email and CCs us on it. Well, we didn't prove that they didn't kill. Our investigation is investigating when you say I didn't have experience investigating deaths, it's really not a death investigation for what we're doing. We're investigating the use of force and whether it was appropriate or not. The ME decides how the person dies. So, I'm not a medical examiner. Maybe if that's what they were trying to say, then they're right. I sent this reply to Scott Davis. Scott, this part was not leaked out. I wish it would have been. Scott, this is the email I was telling you about. I don't know why Lieutenant Brown and I were CC'd on this email. We did not have anything to do with their number crunching or whatever was done. Our investigation did not prove they did not cause Ronald Greene's death. Our investigation was about the use of force and whether it was appropriate. The evidence does not support the force used. I am including the report that was attached. The report does not support their claims. One example, the report mentions intrusion into the occupant compartment as a significant factor in most of the fatal injuries. Where you could see Ronald Greene's car, there was no intrusion into the compartment. There wasn't an intrusion into Greene's car. The email says the impact, sudden speed reduction, violent rotation of Greene's vehicle generated approximately 19 G's of force. I don't know anything about G-force, but one Google search has led me to an article stating humans can't absorb more than 9 G's. Like, I don't know anything about G's. And I just want to documentation showing Lieutenant Brown and I didn't have anything to do with this, and I wanted you to see it. Thanks, Albert. I sent that to document it. Then they're into it and nothing, and then they come up and start doing investigations into the other guys, and I'm telling Gus Bethea about Ronald Greene stuff, hoping he'll go back and tell the colonel, so maybe he'll want to talk to us. Well, at that point, I had a relationship with Doug, so I reached out to him. Now, I told him, look, man, there's stuff with Ronald Greene's the investigation that was like his death was we didn't prove that he didn't cause his death. I don't know what you're being told. And then I told him, I said, there's video Corey York committing a battery on him, and then Ronald Greene dies. And if you're just watching DeMoss's video when York pulls him back and they pulls him back and leans over him, DeMoss gets in the car for about a minute, then he gets out. Ronald Greene's being sat up. If you're just watching DeMoss's video, DeMoss leaves at that point. At one point, and he's searching the car. The next time you see Ronald Greene, he's still being sat up in the same spot. So you didn't even know from DeMoss's video that they put him back down and held him down like that. So anyway, I wanted to tell Doug. I didn't want to get blamed for something or be accused of something that we didn't do. And that's when I told him that there were issues with there was stuff in that email that wasn't true, and he just said it was my understanding we didn't cause Greene's death, and and I told him, I said, man, the cocaine use and the alcohol are going to be contributing factors, probably. I mean, that's all part of it. It's part of the investigation. And then he started saying that as we wade these waters, we're going to go whichever way the bread comes, and I just realized that I was wasting my time, and so I just said okay.
Did y'all do an accident report, like an accident?
We didn't.
Did y'all do an accident reconstruction? That's what I meant.
We wouldn't do one. The troop would have done one, but I don't think they did one. They did the 19G thing, I guess, or whatever. But I mean, I didn't. I mean, like I told, I'd worked at Troop A for 4 years, and you work on the road for a while, and you work a lot of fatal crashes. I've never heard of somebody dying from G forces.
So you're not aware of an accident reconstruction, and it was Officer York who did the...
He did the crash investigation.
And there was no mention of a post-struggle or an arrest report in the.
I haven't looked at it in a while. I included it in the case file. I don't know. I mean, I would assume he probably put in the narrative CCID report. I mean, now if he didn't do it, that wouldn't have. I have the crash report that's going to be part of the case file. So I'm doing the investigation. So that's something I'm going to look at. But to me, the crash was a part of the event, but it's not. We're investigating the force used. And that was all done after the crash.
Right. Was there an event recorder recovered after this?
I think there was, and that was part of and that was put in the case file too. And it really, I don't remember really getting anything from it. I addressed it in the report, but it's it says he was going a certain speed a few seconds before the impact with the tree. And it may have said, it's got other information in there, but if you're looking through it and you're not familiar with that stuff, it's you're gonna have to get somebody to explain it to you.
Okay. Representative Bachla has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm guessing that in addition to the information you collected in the reports that you wrote, you also read or had access to all the reports written about the incident from those who were involved.
Yes, sir. And the only other, we got DeMoss's use of force report. The incident happened like at midnight on the 9th, 10th of May. We got DeMoss's use of force report emailed to us the following week. I wasn't aware that Chris Hollingsworth did a use of force report, and he didn't do one until May 27th of 2019. I was not aware of it until Scott Davis told me about it.
Okay, well, here's my question. If you've had access to those reports, either around the time your investigation began or later, how accurately do the reports written by the officers involved match up with the video that you have viewed?
Most of the time, like with DeMoss's, he's going to go into it briefly, and that's what he did, and he just said CCID report because it's going to be a criminal investigation. They're going to leave most of the details to us. Hollingsworth, it said he mentioned using strikes to the head, and he said he used a half-second OC spray burst to the face with a mace. They're going to be limited because they're going to come in and give us a statement. That's where most of the details are going to be.
Okay, well, combined with the statements that were given, does it accurately depict what is obvious on the video?
They're not. They're not going to put a lot of detail in there. I kind of understand what you're saying, but typically I know it's policy they have to fill that out. But they're going to be very limited in what I didn't see anything that was just totally different.
Okay. You've answered the question.
Yeah.
It wasn't substantially different. It wasn't a completely inaccurate accounting.
No, there wasn't, but they're not going to put a lot of detail in there.
All right. And I think right now, when we talk about the criminal investigation, that's going to play out in the federal system at this point. So we're not trying to come to a conclusion on that. I think we're letting that unfold in the federal investigation. I was a little bit confused. Were you on the criminal investigation team? Because at some point you said you presented evidence to, and you gave 3 names to determine if there should be a criminal investigation. So I'm confused about what your role was versus these other 3 people.
When you say other 3 people, who you
said you guys presented evidence to, and you named 3 people, and you expected them to open a criminal investigation.
Oh, we presented evidence to Scott Brown, and I met with our captain, Bo Loomis, and Chavez Cameron, and Colonel Kenny Van Buren.
So, captain, the colonel, who was it?
They were Lieutenant. It was Lieutenant Colonel Kenny Van Buren over the Bureau of Investigation, and Colonel Chavez Cameron over patrol. We went over the Clary video, went over the incident because I don't think either one of them had seen all the evidence, went over all of it, explained how I came across the Clary video, and then said, okay,
Can you roughly date this meeting for me?
Yeah, it's in the notes. It's in April of 2021.
Okay.
Monday, April 19th.
Well, it's a long time frame. I mean, let's talk about it, if you don't mind. Let's keep it in 2019. Who had been briefed by you in 2019?
In 2019, I briefed was Scott Brown, and I briefed John Peters, Bob Brown, and I briefed Jason.
Ranks, please.
Bob Brown was the major over the Bureau of Investigations, and John Peters was the captain over patrol, or Troop F. And then I told my captain about it, Jason Turner, the following week. And then we took when I was finished with the case file in August or September of 19, we took it to John Belton and gave him the case file and went over the case file with him.
Okay. So at least in 2019, a major and a couple captains knew a little bit, or you and Brown had briefed the captain, two captains and a major.
Yes, sir.
And a DA.
Yes, sir.
Okay, were you going up the chain, was anybody else up the chain of command involved in any decision making or have any awareness of what was going on, or did anybody reach out to you and say, tell me what's happening?
Nobody reached out to me. I have no idea who else knew in the chain of command or up higher than what I've told you. I would assume that they would have been told.
When you talk about you and Brown briefed these three individuals, were they briefed? Did you initiate the briefing, or did they ask for a briefing?
They asked for a briefing.
All right. So they asked to be briefed. You gave them the briefing, and at that point, y'all walked away. And I think your earlier statement was you expected an open criminal investigation to be opened.
I would have figured it would have, yes, sir.
But as far as you know, that was the end of it until all the public gets involved, right?
Yes, sir.
So do you have any idea what any of these individuals did in furtherance of the criminal investigation that you expected?
No, sir.
All right. Okay, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Bacala. Representative Nelson.
Hey, Mr. Paxton, I just have a pretty simple question. So I read that the airbags didn't deploy in the car. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
And so, 19 Gs, that's, I think, maybe like what a space shuttle when it blows up is what you see.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just know that, and I think without getting into it, because then I'm going to go way past, but the G-forces really matter when you're going straight up. It's like if you're going it may have been 19 Gs, but 19 Gs going to the side is not as important as the G-forces going up because all the blood drains from your head. I just knew that I didn't know anything about G-forces, and I was pretty sure that G-forces didn't kill somebody up there.
And so but the airbags didn't deploy in the car.
The airbags didn't deploy, and the windows weren't even broken in the car.
So, I mean, I didn't see any pictures of the car, but it seems like a significant crash. I mean, I read somewhere in the report it was like, oh, he was going 100 miles an hour. If he was going 100 miles an hour into a tree, I would imagine.
And I think he was going 100 miles an hour at some point.
Yeah,
but the pipe, when he hit the
not
tree,
an
it was
impact.
like just yes, sir. And it was a side impact. It was kind of like a side, and then it went. It wasn't like a direct, but it was like a side, then kind of to the front a little bit.
So kind of like clipped his mirror or something like that. Versus,
I think it clipped a mirror and kind of dented up the side of the car, but it didn't even break the windows.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it just. To me, I mean, obviously, I'm not a crash reconstruction expert, but if the airbags don't deploy, the windows don't get broken, there's no intrusion, then it kind of seems like it's really not that serious of a crash, right?
Oh, yes, sir. I mean, and there wasn't any. We never thought it was a serious crash. I mean, I didn't.
Yeah.
And you can go on State Police's website, and they do press releases for every fatal they've ever worked, and you'll never see a press release that says it was the G-forces that killed somebody.
Yeah.
And the report that they cited mentioned serious intrusion into the vehicle, like there was blunt force trauma. Well, there was no intrusion into the vehicle.
All right. Thank you. That's it. Simple question.
All right. Thanks a lot. Representative Villio.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Mr. Paxton. When I was a prosecutor, I always told jurors to judge the credibility of a witness not just by what they said, but by their motivation to testify, what they had to gain or lose, and their demeanor. And I want to thank you, Mr. Paxton. Finally, I feel like we've had a witness who is wholly believable today, and I really appreciate your testimony. Just want to ask a couple of things. The meeting to discuss the Clary body-worn camera video, those individuals, Lieutenant Colonel Kenny Van Buren, Lieutenant Colonel Cameron Chavez, and Major Jason Turner.
What? Major Turner wasn't there. It was Captain Loomis was there.
Okay. I know for sure Kenny Van Buren and Cameron Chavez had been promoted by Colonel Davis. Is that true?
Yes, ma'am.
What about the third one? The individual you just indicated, had he been promoted as well?
Yes, ma'am.
By Colonel Davis?
Yes, ma'am.
It would seem that the casual observer may ask, why would Lieutenant Clary give a statement that doesn't match his video? And surely some would say, well, it couldn't have been intentional then, right? But that's why he misclassified the video, correct? The video was not supposed to be found.
No, I don't think he was going to give it to us. I mean, he wasn't going to give it to CI. He wasn't going to give it to me. That was the other part about the May 16th, 2019 meeting. When we talked about charging Hollingsworth, we went over all the evidence we had also. It was like there were 2 Union deputies out there. Did we have body cam from them? No. Do we have we only had body camera of the incident from DeMoss, and that was it. And Hollingsworth's body camera, Hollingsworth had 2 body cameras. One that was initially that shows him taking down his dash camera, then turning on his lights as soon as he hears a pursuit coming, and then 4 minutes he's turning his his body camera off. So you didn't have it of the incident, but then his body camera came on, and he was calling his friend to talk about what happened out there. So we talked about those 3 body cameras, and those were the only body cameras we had that showed anything.
And in fact, Lieutenant Clary's body camera is at such an angle and captures the incident so that it leaves little doubt as to what occurred. Isn't that true?
In my opinion, it doesn't leave doubt as to what occurred. And you can say, okay, maybe you can. I think the evidence indicates that they're putting OC spray in his face. Sure. I don't think any sane person will argue that they're not doing something to him. So, and that is, he's already on the ground. He screams out, and that I think it's Harpin who says, "Yeah, that shit hurts, doesn't it?" And then, they'd already washed off and then gloved up to move in around his face. Nobody told me. Harpin didn't mention that when I talked to him. John Clary didn't mention anything afterwards that he was when he was in custody, and Corey York didn't mention anything afterwards. When I got there and I first talked to them, I said, "Look, I got to get a statement from you. It doesn't have to be now. We can do it later, like when the other 2 guys do it." All 3 of them said it was over before Harpin said I helped put him in handcuffs, and that's all I did. The other 2 said it was over before we got there.
Tell me about the misclassification itself, the burying of the video. Do you know what it is Lieutenant Clary did to misclassify it?
I'm not aware that he actually misclassified the video.
Okay.
As far as I know, he labeled it correctly and downloaded it, or
Okay.
uploaded it and downloaded it. He just told me he didn't have it. And he knew I couldn't look at it or couldn't get into it.
Okay. So you didn't have access
I didn't know, ma'am.
on that axon.
No, ma'am.
And he told you it didn't exist.
Yes, ma'am.
Gotcha. And how early on did you determine that there was excessive force used? Did you just say May of 2019, the same month of the incident?
Yes, ma'am. May of, during the following week. I mean, I can't even, Jerry was the initial case agent. I'm out there the first day making sure that we're getting all the evidence that we need to get at that point and helping him. I'm involved, but I'm just trying to help him get to a point where he can deal with it. Helping him search the car, talk to whoever we got to talk to or whatever. So it really wasn't until the following week that we really started looking into the videos.
And while plaintiffs and the Greene family in this incident had a year to bring a lawsuit, Wouldn't you agree with me, Mr. Paxton, that when you determined there was excessive use of force, that a preservation of evidence memo by someone, some leader in the department, should have been immediately issued in order to preserve all evidence?
Well, they should have been.
Should have been that night, but
Well, it should have been that. But it's you can get into state police policy is pretty thick, and it gets into all kinds of different types of things. But when you're dealing with criminal matters, I never worried as much about policy. I just knew I wasn't going to break the law, meaning that if I had evidence, that I was going to keep it, and I was going to make sure it got to where it needed to get to. So even if there wasn't I don't know how you can send. We're all supposed to be police. I thought everybody that works for state police has a badge. Police know that you preserve evidence. So I don't know what excuse you can give if you have evidence that you don't keep it.
and what about the wiping of phones?
If they don't have evidence on it, then it's not a big deal. But if they have evidence, then they're the only ones that can tell you that.
Now, it's rumored that then Major Cain was keeping former Colonel Reeves apprised of everything going on with the Greene investigation, to include the administrative investigations. Do you know if that's true or not?
I just know it's a rumor. I can't say that it's true. I mean, for sure, for 100%, but I know that's what I was told.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Paxton.
Thank you, Representative Villa. Representative Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one question. First of all, Mr. Paxton, thank you for being here, and I do agree with my colleague that I find your testimony to be very credible. I do just have one question for my clarification. You mentioned earlier that 4 LSP employees went to meet with DA Belton to try to prevent anyone from being prosecuted. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for me?
That's what I've been told. Lori James and John Belton told me that Chavez Cameron, Bomar Davis, Faye Morrison, and Doug Cain came up there.
DA Belton told
Yes,
you
sir.
that they
Yes, sir.
tried to prevent him from prosecuting
He said
anyone?
that Lori said Doug seemed angry that they even considered it, and they argued that what they were doing, they made the argument, or Doug Cain did the talking, according to Lori James.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is what she told me, that they were saying that when he screamed out, when they had gloved up and they were pulling taser probes out of him. So I guess they were trying to say they were rendering aid. Well, you can look at the evidence in the case, the video evidence, the pictures, the taser probes are all there after that event.
Yeah, but I just want to be clear, because that's look, and I'm trying to approach this from a standpoint of fairness to everyone. That's a really strong, accusation when we say that 4 people basically tried to obstruct justice, tried to prevent anyone from being prosecuted. Did the DA say that?
He didn't. I don't know if you'd have to ask him exactly, but they wanted to.
Well, I mean, you said it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, they wanted to. They were. Lori James said Doug Cain was upset that they even considered it, and they said that my report was wrong, that it wasn't mace that was being used, or Doug said this. I'm not even sure if the other 3 said anything, but they said Doug did most of the talking. So,
Right.
I presented the case to Chavez Cameron, the whole thing, and to he and Kenny Van Buren. So they knew that there weren't taser probes being pulled out.
Okay. But we can agree that the DA, in this case, DA Belton, is a independent, duly sworn, elected district attorney that is obligated to be ethical and do right and follow the law. So basically, regardless if someone tries to persuade him to do X, Y, Z, if he has evidence to prosecute anyone, he should do that. We can agree on that, right? Regardless if somebody tries to persuade him or not, he should just do the right thing.
Well, yes, sir. That's up to him.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, thank you. All right. That's the last of our questions, Mr. Paxton. I really appreciate you for coming today. I know you didn't have to be here and you came of your own free will, so it is definitely appreciated.